half a day, and welcome to Coffee with the Candidates. This series was created to educate and inform Guam's voting population on the positions candidates running for office take on some of the island's most controversial topics. In this episode of Coffee with the Candidates, former Democratic Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes and Javier Atalig, a Republican senatorial hopeful. Stay right there for more after this.
Welcome back to Coffee with the Candidates. I'm here with Javier Atalig, Republican seeking a seat for the 35th Guam Legislature. Half a day, Javier.
Half a day, Andrea, and thank you for having me here on this show, Coffee with the Candidates. Greatly appreciate that.
Mangatsung. Everybody knows you. It's Mangatsung. Everywhere you post, you see it. How did you adopt that?
I got that word Mangatsung from former Lieutenant Governor Frank Blas. He introduced that when he ran for governor with Simon Sanchez. So ever since that, I've always liked that with the white lettering and a blue-black background.
What does it mean to you and your campaign?
Okay, when you say Gatsung, you're being singular. When you're saying Mangatsung, you're saying plural.
Plurality, right.
You're right. So I've always said that I can't be related to everybody and anybody. So what it is that's my way of establishing transparency as far as reaching out to the people. You know, I want you to be comfortable. If I'm fortunate and I get elected, I want you to come into my office and tell me, what can I do through legislative policy making to improve our way of life here in Guam?
You're a regular caller on News Talk K57, so we're definitely not strangers on some of the issues. One thing that I know about you, Javier, is you're very outspoken. You really don't hide behind anything, and you like to tackle issues head on. What are the three things that you want to address first if you were to be elected into the 35th?
Number one is, first thing I would like to do is put legislative reform. Number two is, in that process, I want to make sure that I stop political corruption. Far too long our government has been operating that way, and I don't appreciate it because look at your liquid fuel tax, look at the pay raise, look at the, what do you call this, the BPT. I'm feeling these things at the gas stations, the restaurants, even when I go shopping for food. You know, everything's gone up. And how long is our government going to keep, dumping the burden on the taxpayers?
So needless to say, you're in opposition of raising taxes.
If we have to cut the government, then we have to cut the government.
I know now you're sounding like a fiscal conservative here. When you say legislative reform, what exactly, specifically, are you looking at that you've seen problems with, and how do you think it could be fixed?
Well, I think we can consolidate all the senators. You know, when they did that legislature down there in Agana, they could have went and built maybe a 5-story building and cut rent, use the rent money that we're using to pay for these senators' offices all over the island, and pay for a bond or whatever the money that we use to build that, and then you always will have all the senators there in one building. Why do I need to drive all around the island and look for these guys when I need to understand who's the committee chair of a certain agency that can do something to help me? You know?
So it's more about how the legislature operates than, let's say, policy reform or anything like that.
Well, when I look at it this way, okay, there's 15 senators, okay, and your budget is already at about $9 million. You do the math. Why should I keep paying for these people to sit in there and do what?
So legislative reform is one of the things that you want to do. Government corruption. What could you do to address some of the problems that we're seeing? It's starting to manifest itself For me, I know that investigations are a big thing. I think being able to clear people's names is a big issue that we should address, because otherwise it becomes a political football back and forth. What do you think needs to be addressed in the government? Where are you seeing corruption?
One word: enforcement. Enforce the law. Making a law to counteract to another law doesn't solve the problem. These guys are all very, very well educated. They'll find a loophole. You know, what gets to me is like when we need money for education, we need money for the hospital, we need money for the law enforcement. They always have a hard time to find it, okay? But when they said, oh, let's get a raise and a retroactive bonus back pay, they found the money immediately.
So when it comes to corruption, if the issue is enforcement, how could you write better enforcement into policy as you draft legislation? What could you do to put more teeth to enforcement?
I would say this: if you're a public official and you commit fraud or something, you need to be punished. Not just a spank in the hand and just say, oh, have a nice day after that. You know, it's like the death penalty. If you enforce the death penalty, I know Guam is very Catholic. It'll never fly, right? But let's just say you put the death penalty out there. I would think before I kill somebody. I would really honestly think, even if I was upset. Because that's the mindset that you need to put these public officials, that if you go and do something corrupted and you break the law, you need to be penalized.
So enforcement being a responsibility of the executive branch over the legislative branch, you would be in charge of the policy itself, not necessarily, in charge of enforcement. What could you do to encourage a better relationship between the legislature and the executive branch to create a better environment where enforcement is a priority?
Well, I look at it this way, right? Every senator holds a committee that oversights the agency. These senators nowadays are just being lazy. They're not going out there and addressing the issues. It's just like I heard this issue with a certain senator that was the oversight committee for GPD and GFD. When they shut down those things, if I was the senator that was the oversight committee chair for that, I would put it in a state of emergency and say, wait a minute now, we can't put people's lives at risk. You need to go out there and address those issues. I mean, it may not be the popular thing to do, but it's always the right thing to do, to make sure that our government runs efficiently, so we, the people, can always know that we're safe.
You bring up the Guam Police Department. Are you concerned about the levels of crime that we're seeing on Guam? What are you most concerned about as far as the safety of the community, and what do you think could help mitigate some of the crime?
Okay, that's a very good question, and here the thing about it is that with federal mandates, the Guam Police Department should be already at about 500 police officers. Currently, we're only at about 3. So how short are we? We're very short. But that's why I really admire the leadership of Chief Joe Cruz, because if you ever hear that guy explain his budgets, you're going to be really amazed how this man has good leadership. He has military background. He was a former police, and now he's the police chief. And GPD has a very good chief. I used to know that my friend's father was the former chief of police, John Nugget. I mean, he's passed. I mean, that guy, when he brought in the neighborhood, what do you call it, that neighborhood patrol, neighborhood watch program, which I see now the Lieutenant Governor, Ray Tenorio, now is trying to go around and reestablish it. And that's a very good thing, because when you have the publics watching out over each other, it kind of brings makes the police feel like they're a community cop. And that's what I would like to see more with GPD. You know, I mean, I've been a private investigator for the last 18 years of my life. You know, imagine me going out there and trying to get private information, or when I see crimes and stuff like that. That's why I'm very active, where I will call anything if I see somebody speeding on the road that's driving recklessly or something. Obviously, we're very short in manpower with the GPD, and also what I wanted to bring up was I know the Delito Precinct has this site on Facebook, and if you see something, you just take a picture of that, and they'll monitor it, and that really brings you know, what do you call this, like a good outreach for your village. You know, I wish every village could have that.
Well, NG 911, which we don't have today, we also know that those funds were absorbed into the general fund, is something that we should have today. And that would be able to go to 911, those photos, instead of a roundabout way to get it to the precincts via social media. What could you do to protect some of the special funds that were unsure of what happened to the money?
Well, you know, when I look at this thing, the government didn't anticipate this $67 million shortfall from President Trump's tax reform, okay? Sure, there's going to be issues, more bigger issues coming up. Look at, come the year 2019, our budget. We're looking at a $120 million shortfall. What are we going to do there? You know, so these are the things where the legislature needs to make very, very good decisions as to what is important and what's not so important. Because, you know, if you have, you know, it's like asking me to go buy medicine or buy gas. If I don't have gas, I can't go and buy my medicine, right? But if I don't eat my medicine, I might die, right? So you got to weigh that out. You got to figure out something that we can find common ground in the middle, and let's meet it halfway, and then we can go from there.
I think compromise may be something, a good place for us to end this interview. Thank you, Javier, for joining us. A Republican, again, running for the 35th Guam legislature. We will be right back right after this. Hafaday, and welcome to Coffee with the Candidates. I'm Andrea Pellicani from News Talk K57, and joining me is former Senator Tina Muñoz-Barnes, running for a seat in the 35th Guam legislature as a Democrat. Welcome to the program, former Senator Barnes.
Hafaday, and good evening, Andrea. Thank you for having me here this evening. I'm really humbled to be here.
What many people don't realize about you is you're an avid sportsman. You played basketball for many years with the Guam Seniors Basketball League. Are you still involved with that program?
I took a break for a little bit, but my love for basketball and softball will never end. My children are playing it and my grandchildren are playing it. So I'm now a great spectator fan.
And maybe side coach.
Side coach.
Yes. You lost your seat after the 33rd, and that was hard for you. You lost by only 20 plus votes, and that's probably a difficult way to lose your seat. The people are speaking out in different ways. What is it that you think you could bring to them that would be more responsive this term?
I think, Andrea, with the compassion in the heart that I have to continue to facilitate and work with programs and bringing new industries to Guam will be a plus for this. I have a passion. I have, my heart is in it with all my life experiences being with government for 34 years and just being in the public sector. I think I have a lot to continue to offer, and I give my heart.
You always do give your heart. We know that you've passed some bills in the past. Those bills have still yet to be enacted on by the government and fully implemented. What do you think you could bring if you brought that to this term to get, such as, for example, everybody is aware of the medical cannabis bill as well as your recycling bill. Those have still yet to move. What can you do in a new term to help move those along?
Andrea, I'm glad you asked that question. With the medicinal cannabis, with the bed and breakfast legislation that was passed, and with the Beverage Container Act, the bottle bill of 2010, I think that if I'm afforded the opportunity again, full implementation, working closely with my colleagues, but more importantly, working with the administration to make sure that those revenue enhancement legislations, those laws, and one of those laws that were passed at the will of the voters here on Guam, I think that bringing all the stakeholders to the table and making sure that implementation is done and making sure that I facilitate it more passionately, more clearly, but making sure I bring everybody to that same table.
Taking a look at the list of candidates, if you want a seat in this term, you could potentially be the veteran member with so many of the candidates being younger, maybe not as experienced. What do you think you could offer to the 35th Guam legislature with this respect?
Again, Andrea, thank you for that. I think what I have to offer is the commitment. Leadership begins with listening and being able to listen not just to our constituents, but to our colleagues, the administration, the agencies, but just everybody out there. I truly believe that the facilitation that I've working with my oversights in the past, with the municipal affairs and with tourism, I think the experience and the expertise there, being in government public service for more than 34 years, I bring a lot of sincerity and a lot of commitment moving things forward. I can say I am a great facilitator and I have no problems on working on both sides of the aisle.
It's been an interesting term watching the 34th, and you've had 2 years to maybe gain different perspective, and who knows, that could be actually a benefit to you. What do you think you've learned over the past 2 years sitting out, watching what's happening lately, and entering possibly into a new term with the new governor? What have you learned that over this period of time that may be different from last time?
Never give up trying, being able to continue a great facilitation, bringing all the parties together that need to pass good legislation through. I think that experience is very valuable, but more importantly, the value of respect and being able to agree, to disagree, but more importantly is to be able to work on both sides of the aisle. And you may not always like what your opponent has to say, but you have to at least listen. And then when you continue to listen, you can come up with very amicable ideas to work for the whole community, not just for the interested few, but for the majority of the community.
There's been some discussion about the Japan market. As the previous oversight chair for tourism, we now see seats opening back up where there was concern about declining Japan tourism numbers. What do you think you could do to aid the Guam Visitors Bureau in bringing those numbers back up?
Andrea, we have to continue to give GVB, the Guam Visitors Bureau, the resources that it needs. We have to continue to negotiate and see how we can open more seats. We also have to also check what LCC carriers out there, the low-cost carriers out there that we can continue to invite to be here. But more importantly, we have to maintain the quality of what we are promoting in our culture, in our language, in our history, but more importantly, marketing ourselves to the rest of the world out there. So GVB has been an incredible agency to help market us to the rest of the world. We need to continue to give them that resources, and I'm very hopeful that with our tourism market being one of our main industries, that we can continue to move forward with giving them the resources and working closely with them.
Do you have any ideas on what we can do as we look at tough times for the government of Guam fiscally? Many fiscal challenges may lie ahead. what can we do to sort of help shape more fiscal responsibility, how the government works? What ideas could you bring to the table for that?
Besides what's already in place, accountability and transparency, we have to make sure that when we look for opportunities for our community to have a better quality of life, we need to bring in new industries. When I was working with the Guam Visitors Bureau, we talked about the cruise industry, worked with the nonprofit organizations out there, PATA, Pacific Asian Travel Agency, to bring new economic viability to Guam. The cruise industry is one that we've continued to tap into. We need to be able to facilitate that and implement that and bring new jobs to Guam.
I think the job market is an important thing to monitor as a government official. But there are also social issues that our island is facing. What do you think are potentially the biggest social issues that the 35th Guam legislature would have to be addressing?
God, Andrea, with the social ills out there, we talk about homelessness. We talk about folks who need counseling and treatment as it relates to drug addiction. We talk about bringing the educational awareness as it relates to other islanders and residents coming to live here in Guam. And I want to say that if there is a effort from the community to come together to bring more training, more education, more awareness, working with our private partners, and again working with the government of Guam, I think that the social impacts that will affect our island with education, with counseling, with training will help.
We have some issues facing the Guam Memorial Hospital and the Department of Education, really as it relates to funding. We also see more interest in charter schools coming up. Obviously, public safety, health, and education are our biggest priorities, as they always are, especially every election. Do you have any interesting things that you've discovered during your time off that might be of interest to the people of Guam as far as the core responsibilities of government?
I think the core responsibilities of government is to provide for the basic services. And in order for us to do that, we need to bring in new industries to Guam. We've got to be able to think outside of the box, and we've got to make sure that the monies are coming in that will help benefit the community in general as it relates to facilities, as it relates to culture, the cultural environment, but more importantly, as it relates to providing jobs for our people. So for me, I continue to make sure that the mission mandates of the agencies within the government are following through. We need to be able to give the strength and the issues of rev and tax to be able to collect the resources so that the government can be able to provide for those basic services. But if you don't give the agencies the tools that they need, then it's not going to be successful. So we literally need to work together. And I've always believed that when you bring everybody to the same table, whether work with public-private partnerships, look at stepping outside the box and bringing new industries in, like we've talked about earlier, I think that we will have a better, successful Guam.
You have a body of work behind you as you run for a seat for this term that people have access to look at how you voted on bills, what bills you've passed. But again, you've had that break. And if there's, in a quick summation, how could people identify you as a candidate as far as what you stand for the 35th Guam legislature?
Andrea, I'd like to tell the people of Guam that I'm a great facilitator, I'm a great listener, and I'm a great follow-through. And I think with my life experiences working in the government and working in the private sector and being able to work closely with nonprofit organizations, I feel that the life experiences that I have brought me here to my next chapter and my next journey to continue to help the people of Guam. It is in my heart. I have the passion and I want to continue to serve. And my family has given me that blessing to say, go ahead and continue to see what you can do for your people.
Senator
our
Barnes,
people.
if there's anything that we do know about you, you are a very passionate person about the issues you believe in. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Coffee with the Candidates. Please join us again for more interviews with candidates asking for your vote. I'm Andrea Pellicani. We'll see you again.